In this video, we're going to talk about the timer titles for DaVinci Resolve by Whip Templates. This is hands down the best timer titles pack that is out there on the market. It contains 30 different timer designs and the most powerful timer framework that exists in DaVinci Resolve. You can do count ups, count downs, you can add a slide animation to each one of them, and just a ton of control over the different designs, as well as setting a max timer, minimum, how much it has to count down from, just a ton of stuff that we can do. Alright, so under the effects library, you can find them in titles under Whip Templates, and then we have the timer titles down here. I'm going to start with timer title number 1, and we're going to begin off to the side here. Right away, you can see it's going to slide on and then just slowly count up over time. Every second, it'll add one to the timer. And this is one of the things that is super cool and exclusive to this pack. It has a slide animation that'll only move the number that's actually updating. So let's zoom out. Let's make this a little bit longer. That way we can see some of the other numbers updating. When it gets to 9 seconds, it's not only going to move the 1, but it's also going to move the other digit to bring it up to 10. And same thing once we get to a minute, it's going to move all 3 of those, and so on and so forth. In the inspector, the first thing we can customize is where it shows up on the screen. Then we get to choose the layout, so we can just show the hours and minutes, hours, minutes, seconds, just the minutes, and just the seconds. And with the minutes and seconds, you'll notice it adds this stop at 60 box. So if we keep going here, once it reaches 60, instead of going 59 and starting over at 0, it'll reach 60 and just stop. If we don't have that turned on, what it's going to do is go to 59 and then start back over at. So depending on what you want to do, you might just want to have that stop at 60 box checked. Now, depending on your system and depending on the design that you're using in the project, the slide animation might be a little heavy. In this case, I can get just about real-time playback, but if I use any of the designs, it typically slows it down just a little bit. I do have a bit of an older system, but in that case, you can always just disable the slide animation and it'll just count normally, and in this case it goes really fast. It is very optimized, very lightweight. But when the slide animation is on, you can invert the slide direction, so that way instead of sliding up, it goes down, and you can also add in some extra scale, so that way there's some padding between the numbers as they slide around. For this, I'm actually just going to disable the slide animation and just have it update one at a time. We're going to skip the countdown button and talk about a few of these other controls first. The first one is offset time, and this is going to be in seconds. This is going to set the starting number. By default, it's going to start at 0, but I could say start at 5 seconds instead of 0. So when it animates on here at the beginning, it's already going to be at 5, and then it's going to start counting. That's what this offset start one is. By default, it's offset by a second, and that's because it takes a second for it to animate on, so it's going to wait a second, and then it'll start counting up. If I want, I could set this to be 0 and this to be 0, and it's going to start counting right away even as that animation is still going on. So if you want, you could set this to be 5 seconds, so the timer animates on, you see that there's going to be a timer, but it doesn't quite start counting yet until a little bit later in our composition, when then it does start counting up. Again, just really cool how much customization there is. This is the same on all of the timer titles. The other thing we can do is enable a max time. So again, this is in seconds. So if I type in 10, it's going to count up exactly like it did before, but once it reaches 10, it'll stop. It won't go up anymore from there. Now, since this is only in seconds, it can be a little bit confusing if you're working with minutes. Let's say that I wanted it to stop counting at 3 minutes. So instead of trying to do the math, this text box can actually do it for us. So if we just type 3 times 60, so 60 seconds times 3, that'll put it at 3 minutes. So if I make this clip longer, come all the way out to the end here, once it gets to 3 minutes, it's going to stop counting and just hold it right there. All right, really cool stuff. We can disable this max time and come up and enable this countdown animation. By default, this is going to start at 10 minutes and then it's going to count down from there. Again, we can come into this box and set it to be something like 10 seconds. So it starts at 10 seconds and then it'll count down until it reaches 0 and then it'll stop there. We still have that same offset control, and in here you could come do 3 times 60 to get it to start at 3 minutes and then count down. All right, so there's something interesting as to how this pack works. So for the most speed and the most optimization, I took a little bit of the convenience away for actually customizing it. So when I change the size, everything's going to work fine when you don't have the slide animation on. But if I enable the slide animation, you can see everything is going to get all messed up when I change the size. And the solution to that is once you make a change, just hit set scale and everything is going to be back to the default. It's a little annoying having to hit that button every time, but it saves so much time in the rendering process. Like, it's probably like 200-300% faster just because of that one change. So it is definitely worth it. Just hit that set scale after you change the size, and that way everything updates so that it works perfectly. All right, let's take a look at one of the designs. Let's say that we're timing how long this guy can stay on his surfboard. All right. Let's do timer title number 2. All right, so we drag this one down. We can set that right to be at the beginning, and we'll drag this out to be the entire duration of the clip. I'm going to move this up into the top left corner just so it's out of the way. And now we can see it's going to animate on. And I want this to start counting right away. So instead of having this offset start at 1, I'm going to set that to be 0. And I actually don't want an animation. I'm just going to turn that off so that way it stays on the screen. So it's going to start counting 1, 2, 3. And maybe we're going to be a little generous. Let's say he's been already going for 8 seconds. So let's start the offset time to be 8 seconds. And that's just going to count back and forth. With this one, we have this really nice line that's just going to, move back and forth as it goes on. So let's go forward here and find when he falls off. If he falls off, yeah, he's just going to keep going. Let's pretend he falls here. I thought this was a different clip. Let's say he fails at 18 seconds. In that case, we could just enable a max time, type 18, and now it's not going to go up at all after that. So we can freeze it, we can stop it, and if you'll notice, that line is actually going to stop moving when it stops counting. So these are just really smart templates that they just work really well. And I want to show off some of these other designs too, so let's do timer title 7. We can do the same thing. Let's put this up here, drag it out. I'm going to come in and turn off the animation, so turn that off. The anim engine is really cool. You can turn animations on and off. You can change how long they take. But this one is going to draw around and complete the circle by the time it's done. So this is another thing. We could offset the time with this, and it's already going to have started counting by the 3 seconds. And then if we enable a max time, let's say 18 seconds again, offset this by 8 and 0, so that way everything was the same as the last one. It's already going to have been counting, and then once it reaches 18, it'll have filled in that circle. So just again, really cool, really smart templates. On my website, you can see a preview of all 30 of these, and you can either buy the timer titles pack on its own or as part of the editor titles bundle, which is definitely the way I would go. You get 270 titles that are all built to the same quality, and they just work really nice. It's a really good asset to have as a video editor. If you have any questions about these titles, please let me know.